benvenuti a...
Welcome, ladies and gentlemen. This session is a particular session. It is a particular session because we are going to talk about a historic document, that is the document on human fraternity that was signed 2 years ago in Abu Dhabi by Pope Francis and the Chief Imam, Dear Lazar, with also an extraordinary presence of heads and leaders from different religions. And we are especially honored to have some of them who were present in Abu Dhabi now here with us today. We talk about human fraternity despite diversity, despite the so many contradictions that exist between the different religions. How can we build a real fraternity, notwithstanding these differences? A group of Muslim philosophers tried to answer this question in the 11th century. These are called Brothers of Purity in Baghdad, which at that time was a cosmopolitan city, the most cosmopolitan city in the world. There were Muslims, Christians, Jews. At that time, the physician there was a Jewish philosopher, the greatest translator that translated the Greek heritage into Arabic. It was part of the royal court in the Caliphate in Baghdad. At that time, there was the flourishing of Islamic civilization. But just like any other civilization, all these flowers of diversity also involves diversity. And this question was posed to this group of philosophers, of brothers, and to respond to this question, they used a metaphor. They said that humanity is like a man that may get ill. One day he may get ill in his heart, and he went to the doctor, that is God, and asked for a treatment. So God gave him this treatment that we, for example, may call Judaism. A long time after that, this man gets another illness, for example, in his stomach. So he goes back to God and asks for more treatment. And this other treatment, for example, we may call it Christianity. Then once again he gets ill, he asks for another treatment, and he gets the treatment once again. And the Brothers of Purity comments on this metaphor by saying, be careful. There's no contradiction between different treatments, and in the same way, notwithstanding the great differences, there's no contradiction between religions. But more than this, the absence of a treatment is a threat to the life of this person. And similarly, the absence of a religion is a threat to the spiritual life of humanity, of the whole humanity. So the other religious being should not only be tolerated and should not only be accepted, but we must acknowledge the uniqueness of their presence, because without them we run the risk of losing our life. So the document of human fraternity is not full of metaphors. It includes a new language. This document created a new dictionary, the language of meeting among people and religions. The title itself of our session this evening refers to this great shift in language, from tolerance to respect. The word respect is a new word in the dictionary of interfaith dialogue. I don't want to take the time of the presenters that we have here this evening. They're high-level guests and that will be addressing this subject, and they will be talking about the concepts included in this document. So I would like to begin by giving the floor to Rabbi Joseph Levi, who is known here at the meeting in Rimini. He's a psychologist, he's a scholar of Jewish studies, and he's a professor at a university, many universities in Italy and abroad. And in my view, the most important thing is that he is director of the Florence School of Advanced Studies for Interreligious and Intercultural Dialogue, where they do education in interreligious dialogue. And this is a new reality in our school because it responds to a great need for education, because education is always the answer. So, Rabbi Joseph Levi, you have the floor, and please welcome Joseph Levi. Thank you for being here. Thank you very much. And I would like to thank the meeting of Rimini, the organizers, the president, who welcomed this idea of having a session to discuss the document signed in Abu Dhabi, and also welcomed other activities that were held yesterday in having meetings, important representatives of Saudi Arabia, Sheikh Nalisa and Alberto and Schneier, who is an important rabbi of an important American community in the United States, in New York. I go straight to the point. I would like to thank you to have this chance to share some pieces of information right away, and to share some ways of thinking about interreligious dialogue. Over the last few years, with the help of the administration and the dioceses of Florence and the Jewish community and the Islamic community, we have created this school that I direct. And we've done this because we believe that there is a need in the future for greater dialogue among religions. It is a simple need for education and for information, but there's also a theological need and a philosophical need to discover the anthropological roots that we all share, and from which we move to other ways and to other religions. So it's very important to find what unites us to be able to go on together. It is an important and necessary work. And as regards the document, I'm going to be brief. I would like to make a couple of points that, well, they may not be negative per se, but they might be problematic, and the other point would be more positive, and I'd rather start off with this in evaluating this document. The Jewish-Islamic dialogue has been existing for more than 20 years, and my colleagues know it very well. Ijadin and other colleagues have taken part in very important debates with Islamic and Jewish theologians, and also from other representatives of the Christian world. And what was the issue? The issue was that it was not the time to do that. The time was not ripe. There were important meetings, important gatherings, but the press, the media, didn't really give the right importance for the future of these conferences. And then we moved to more practical activities in knowledge building and so on and so forth. So this is something important that we have to consider, because we as journalists sometimes do not really capture the importance of certain aspects in a certain time, and we cannot communicate it appropriately. So in this sense, the document helped us make a leap forward. This now is at the center of the debate, and this evening we are going to listen to highly interesting remarks. It would be really nice to be more and more involved in the interreligious dialogue, at least for Abrahamic religions. Then the other point is good news that is linked to the previous point I've raised. And this refers to the document that we have today, which was signed by Pope Bergoglio and the Imam. So two very important representatives of the Catholic world and Islamic world. But behind that, there's a very long preparation. There's very long meetings, profound theological work. So I am particularly pleased to be here this evening to talk about this subject and to talk about it publicly. But I wanted to emphasize that there's been a lot of political work in which we are interested up to a certain point and not here, but also very important theological work. There's many institutions that have worked on this subject and elaborated on this subject. For example, this evening we're going to listen to the director of the Interreligious Department of Jordan, and then we're going to listen to Marc Schneier, of course. But I would like just to mention one of the meetings in which I had the opportunity to participate. This was in December 2018 in Abu Dhabi. The 5th of December, some months before the document was signed. And the main figure, the very important theologian, Sheikh Abul Baya, in the Islamic world, invited in Abu Dhabi, thanks to the government support, 700 theologians, representatives of the Islamic world, the Jewish American world, the Christian world, with the different facets. And this was done at the end of the day to present his theological doctrine, which insisted in the notion of citizenship as an Islamic theological concept. This was really, really nice and interesting. There's no time now to go into the details, but I invite you all to check it out and see this theological reasoning that was shared in Abu Dhabi. And the idea was that the world is based on a pre-established balance, where every man, together with rights, has obligations to maintain a certain brotherhood, a certain behavior that will contribute to keeping, to preserving the balance of the entire world. This is also a Jewish concept, but that's not the point now. I just wanted to emphasize this. So according to this philosophical and theological view, he tried to explain to Islamic representatives at a conference that was entitled Organization to Bring Peace to the Islamic World, and he explained that in the Quran, I'm not the person that can explain it as good as he did, but even before revelation to Muhammad, the Prophet, there had been a development between the citizens in Mecca and Medina to find among themselves a notion of living together and of brotherhood that enabled them to go on with a social project. So this is an Islamic concept, and he was saying we in the Islam have the fundamental notions to be able to carry on and propose it to others for the future of humanity. I wanted to share this story because I'm very interested in interreligious dialogue, and to me that was a fascinating moment, being together with 700 theologians, Muslim theologians, and not talking about exclusion and all the other things that the press mentioned. Instead, we found ourselves in a profound harmony that was justified by a theology that, in my view, was so close to the theology of man in the Jewish world and based on the legal and theological concepts that one of the most important representatives of the legal world in the Islamic culture could explain. So we left that meeting full of hope, and we felt that the change was coming. After 4 months, the other document was published. It was signed in Abu Dhabi. So just I wanted to bring this and to share this as an addition to all the important words that we're going to listen to. Thank you very much.
Non voglio che pensiamo che questo documento.
Don't think that this document on human fraternity was only focusing on interfaith dialogue. The document was also focusing on topical issues such as environment, peripheral areas, a document on human fraternity in all its different aspects. So I'm going to ask to His Excellency Msgr Ortega Martín to tell us about the different aspects of this document. Msgr Martin is very well known to the people here in the meeting of Rimini. He's a diplomat of the Vatican. He's an Apostolic Nuncio in Iraq and Jordan, and is also he's also been the Archbishop there since 2015. So I was able to hear his extraordinary speech on the darkest times in that area of the world, and from this experience, I think we can better understand this document. I'm going to give you the floor. I'm really very happy to participate in this meeting, and thank you very much to the organizers. Talking about dialogue is always necessary, but it is even more necessary right now at these moments. I do like the title of this meeting, which is taken from a sentence from a speech by Pope Francis in Morocco, From Tolerance to Respect, because it indicates a way forward, where the fact that we need to reach tolerance is a step forward, but is not enough. Tolerance still needs to be really acknowledged. Respect still needs to be really acknowledged. In this context, the Catholic Church has made a lot of progress, especially after the Second Vatican Council, and from a very important declaration called the Nostra Aetate on the relations between the Christian Church and non-Christian religions, which still today is a point of reference for all of us. Then the following popes, after the Council, significantly contributed to this dialogue. I like to underline the role of Saint John Paul II in his many meetings with many representatives of different religions, even in Assisi, where he met different religious leaders. That was a very important moment. Even Pope Benedict significantly contributed. You know that he took a very important speech in Ratisbona, and there was a lot of polemic because there was a wrong interpretation of the text, but that was an important step forward to establish relations with other religions, especially the Muslim religion. And now we have with us the director of the Royal Institute for Interfaith Studies. We know that that was fundamental. Even Pope Benedict significantly contributed to interreligious dialogue, and Pope Francis also significantly contributed thanks to his skill to establish personal relations. Interfaith, interreligious dialogue is not just a dialogue among religions, but among people of different religions. In this context, personal relations, mutual esteem and mutual friendship are of the utmost importance. And this is the 40th anniversary of the meeting, and this is an example of that. This is an example of the personal relations, of dialogue, and significantly contributes to interreligious dialogue. Now, I will focus on the relations between Pope Francis and the Muslim world. These are milestones that were very important, and I'm going to use Pope Francis's words. A very important moment was the visit of the Pope in Egypt in 2017, in April 2017, where the Pope participated in an international conference for peace at the University of Al-Azhar. It was a very important time, and the fact that he participated in this conference shows the importance of interreligious dialogue for the promotion of peace. It is a privileged way to promote peace. A lot was said about education. A lot was said about taking initiatives, making initiatives together, the importance of collaboration. And in a very important speech, the Pope talked about three fundamental milestones that can help dialogue. And I quote, the duty of identity, the courage of otherness, and the sincerity of intentions. This is the key for a true dialogue. The duty of identity. It's not that we need to change or we need to make a strategy. We need to have dialogue, and we can have dialogue if we have our own identity. The courage of otherness is important because it is important to acknowledge that the other is important for me. The other one is good for me. Or as the Pope recalled in the message sent to the meeting, loving is stating the other. This is the courage of otherness, acknowledging the other as a good for me. And then the sincerity of intentions. This is a very important concept for the dialogue. This is a very nice statement made by Pope Francis, where he says, the only alternative to the civility of encounter is the incivility of conflict. It is fundamental to promote the civility of encounter. Another major milestone was Pope Francis's journey to Abu Dhabi in February 2019. During the Pope's audience, the Pope was talking about this journey and said, a short but very important journey, which, drawing on the 2017 encounter in Al-Azhar, Egypt, has written a new page in the history of dialogue between Christianity and Islam, and in the commitment to promote peace in the world on the basis of human fraternity. So, as was already said, this document needs to be studied. It is very important. And the signatory parties said that this is a guide. This has to be studied as a document in schools and universities. At a time where there is a strong temptation to see an ongoing conflict between the Christian and Islamic civilizations, initiatives can be made together. It is possible to meet, to encounter one another, to have mutual respect, and to have a dialogue. When the Pope went to Abu Dhabi, he also held a very important speech talking about the point of departure for this dialogue. And I quote, "The point of departure is the recognition that God is at the origin of the one human family. He who is the creator of all things and of all persons wants us to live as brothers and sisters, dwelling in the common home of creation which is given us. Fraternity is established here at the roots of our common humanity as a vocation contained in God's plan of creation." So we need to acknowledge God as the origin of the human family. And interreligious dialogue is not just trendy, but it plays a fundamental role of God's creation and God's plan of salvation. And this is the way forward. In this context, the Pope invites people to pray and talks about the importance of prayer. The prayer made with the heart, which can lead to fraternity. He talks about education, justice, and in the declaration there's many different aspects. And then another very important milestone was the Pope's journey to Morocco in March 2019. On that occasion, the Pope said that that journey was a new step forward in the encounter with Muslim brothers and sisters to be a servant of hope in today's world. The Pope said on that occasion that we must not fear differences. God allowed this. And this is a very beautiful sentence. He said, "We should be afraid were we to fail to work fraternally, to walk together in life." We don't have to fear differences. We have to be afraid of not living in brotherhood, in fraternity. He made an important speech before the authorities, and he recalled the famous meeting of St. Francis of Assisi and the Sultan. And he said that that prophetic event shows that the courage to encounter one another and extend the hand of friendship is a pathway of peace and harmony for humanity. That's the way forward. And he also gave important suggestions to promote dialogue. He also made reference to the Abu Dhabi document to talk about the importance to promote the culture of dialogue as the way forward. Collaboration as a conduct, mutual knowledge as a standard. This is fundamental. The culture of dialogue as a way forward, mutual cooperation is our code of conduct, and reciprocal understanding is our method and standard. And at the end of his speech, the Pope makes reference to the importance of strengthening the real religious faith in the hearts of new generations. And this is also stated in Abu Dhabi document. The religious factor is important in order to build bridges between men and women. So it is important to strengthen the religious faith uniting us all. It is a common asset. Sometimes people look at conflicts, especially among extremists, and one would be tempted to see the religion as the cause of a problem. As Cardinal Turan, who passed away last year, used to say, religion is not a problem, religion is a solution. If men and women lived based on religious beliefs, things would be very different. In this regard, the Pope continued, there is a constant need to progress beyond mere tolerance to respect and esteem for others. And this is the title of this meeting. This entails encountering and accepting others in their distinctive religious beliefs and enriching one another through our diversity in a relationship marked by goodwill and by the pursuit of ways we can work together. Understood in this way, creating bridges between people from the point of view of interreligious dialogue calls for a spirit of mutual regard, friendship, and indeed fraternity. These are important guidelines and suggestions to all of us. I hope that there will be another important milestone. You know that on the 10th of June, Pope Francis attended a meeting with people helping Eastern churches, and he said that next year he wants to go to Iraq. This is not official, but once the Pope has said that he wants to go to Iraq, I think that he will go to Iraq. The president of Iraq had already invited him, and he immediately said, and Patriarch immediately wrote, everyone is enthusiastic, we're looking forward to meeting Pope Francis. And on that occasion, I hope will bring further progress. The Pope will hopefully go to Ur. You know, you remember the connection between Abraham and Ur. If he manages to go to Ur, that would be a very important contribution, and it will be a further opportunity to strengthen the importance of dialogue and to show, with this new language, that there are many opportunities to cooperate together, and I hope that will be possible, and I invite you all to pray for that. And I invite you to shift from tolerance to respect in your daily life, knowing that the other is a good for me. Thank you. Thank you to His Excellence. You really explained this change in language very well. I can also say that there is a change in the look. I remember the visit of Pope Francis in Cairo. Before the visit, in every corner of the city, there was a picture of the Pope dressed in white, with the pyramids behind, and a dove, a white dove, and it was everywhere in Cairo before the Pope came over. Then the next day, all these images disappeared. They couldn't be found anywhere. Why? Because a new image was put in the city. There was above the Pope hugging the Imam El-Azhar, and below St. Francis hugging the Great Sultan. So, the importance of this document is exactly this, as in the Pope's ability to generate a new look. A new look at the future, at the past, and at history. The meeting between Francis and Sultan had been forgotten, but this gesture recalled it and showed a new way forward. Now, Professor Wajih Kanso, Professor of Hermeneutic Philosophy at the Lebanese University, Director of the Royal Institute for Interfaith Studies, author of many different books and articles. Can you please tell us what is the meaning of shifting from tolerance to respect? What steps forward have been taken to shift from tolerance to respect? I give you the floor.
Thank you very much. Good evening. I would like first to express my gratitude and happiness to be with you in this event, which is a really an extraordinary event. It's not just domestic or national. It's more like global event actually. And I would like to thank all the organizers and those who contributed in that event. As for the topic of this event, of this panel, from tolerance to respect, probably we need to really understand what does this to from means. Where tolerance, what are the basic components of tolerance, and what are the basic components of respect. To be brief, I will speak on three main things here. First, the meaning of going from tolerance to respect, and second, how this was reflected in the Abu Dhabi Declaration, and if I have enough time to speak about the challenges that we are facing or such declaration is facing. In general, tolerance is about accepting and being open-minded. Some consider this to be a very negative concept, while this concept is a basic element and component of Western modernity, because this concept was basically elaborated on in the 17th and the 18th century by many Western philosophers. The basic element of tolerance is first what we may say the self-control, which is to resist our urge to forcefully prohibit the expression of activities that we find unpleasant. Somehow, this concept means that toleration is indifferent about the object or the other activities. It just leaves space for the object and retreat from the self-centeredness and acknowledge the right of the other to exist. The other central concept is what we may call it autonomy. Autonomy means, and this is a concept basically well elaborated by the philosopher John Stuart Mill. He argued that individuals ought to be left to pursue their own good in their own way, in part because each individual knows himself and his own needs and interests best. Such a concept has kind of implications. We may say one of it is epistemological, that has to do with the truth, which means that nobody has the right to impose the truth on the other, whether it's a community or an individual or a person. So a person is the only one who is eligible to look for truth and to find it. And by the way, this is different than saying that truth is relative. On the moral level, autonomy means that it's a commitment that I allow another person to do something that I find abhorrent, not because I believe that values are relative, but because I believe that autonomy is so important that it requires me to refrain from negating the autonomous action of another free agent. This kind of concept led actually to the concept of liberty, because liberty is not about right or wrong in finding the truth, but about limiting the harmness of one person onto the other. On the political level, this concept, toleration, was aimed at having the state to be neutral, objective, and fair. In other words, a state has no right to adopt a specific concept or to be biased for one community on the account on the other community. So the political referee, which is the state, should be impartial and unbiased. Okay. This is what I have concluded from the concept of toleration. As for respect, it is in general a particular mode of apprehending the other. The person who respects something pays attention to it and perceives it differently from someone who does not, and responds to it in light of that perception. Respect means that you see the object or the other clearly and in its own right. The philosophical basis of this, the philosophical basis of this concept can be found in Immanuel Kant's philosophy which recognizes the person
dove viene riconosciuta
as a value by himself.
come entità che ha valore in se stessa.
So all persons are owed respect
Ogni persona è
just
dovuto
because they are persons.
solo per il fatto di essere delle persone.
To be a person is to have a status
Essere una persona
and worth
avere uno status,
that is unlike of any other kind of being.
un valore che è diverso da quello che hanno tutti gli altri esseri.
So this makes the person an end by itself.
Questo rende la persona un fine in se stessa.
And all rational beings are ends in themselves.
Gli esseri razionali sono finalità in se stesse.
Thus, to understand the move from tolerance
Quindi per capire il passaggio
to respect,
dalla tolleranza alla stima,
it means that tolerance is about rights,
dobbiamo capire che la
human rights, law,
tolleranza vuol dire diritti,
and respect is about values.
stima vuol dire valori.
Tolerance is about ontic, or let's say physical space.
Spazio ontico o spazio fisico.
Respect is about existential space.
Invece spazio esistenziale.
And when we say existential space, it means,
Quando parliamo di spazio esistenziale,
what does it mean? As if we try to answer the question, what does it mean to exist?
la domanda cosa vuol dire esistere?
Tolerance is about self-restraint.
Tolleranza vuol dire autolimitazione,
Respect is about meaning and significance of life.
significato e senso della vita.
Tolerance is about managing life.
Tolleranza vuol dire gestire la vita,
Respect is about cherishing life.
vuol dire amare la vita.
Tolerance is about living.
Tolleranza vuol dire
Respect is about existing.
stima, vuol dire esistere.
Tolerance is about survival
Tolleranza vuol dire sopravvivenza
and exiting the state of war of all against all.
uscire dallo stato di guerra
The Thomas Hobbes term. And respect is about
rispetto,
exploring flux
esplorare
of life, desire, and forms.
dei desideri e delle forme della vita.
Oh, okay. I'm almost done. Tolerance is about economy or balance of power
Economia o equilibrio di potere
and authority.
e autorità,
Respect is about exploring difference
esplorare
and endless possibilities of human
possibilità
existence.
dell'esistenza umana.
Now, how can this be sensed in the
Ebbene,
Abu Dhabi Declaration?
si può riscontrare tutto questo all'interno della dichiarazione di Abu Dhabi.
I could see three major reflections.
Posso portare tre riflessioni principali.
The first one is that the religious discourse
La prima è che il linguaggio religioso, il discorso religioso,
is considering all of humanity as one community.
considera l'intera umanità come un'unica comunità.
So the question now become not about for each religion
Adesso la domanda non
to increase its number of followers,
è per le religioni di aumentare il numero di credenti,
but the question is what can religion really provide for humanity?
fare veramente la religione per l'umanità.
The second implication is that salvation
L'altro punto è che
is not restricted anymore on the day after,
si limita più su
but salvation has something to do with life.
la salvezza ha a che fare con la vita.
So life itself has a value by itself
Ha valore per
and should be cherished.
e deve essere amata.
So it's not how to get God's forgiveness in the day after,
Non si tratta di arrivare ad avere il perdono di Dio,
but how to live a dignified life in our daily life.
rendere degno omaggio alla nostra vita tutti i giorni.
And the third implication I can deduce
Il terzo punto che possiamo trarre
is how to give meaning of life.
è come riuscire a dare significato alla vita.
It's not just enough to live, But what does it mean to live? So the religious discourse and main religions, I think this is their main challenge now, is what is the meaning of this life? The life by itself that we live in our daily times and everyday time, not just the day after and the day of judgment. Okay, the question of challenges, since I don't have time, I will stop here and thank you very much.
Thank you. Grazie mille, professore.
Thank you very much, Professor. Now, his short curriculum vitae is 3 pages long, but I like introducing him as a visionary person, the visionary person in what he has done, in everything he has done, in all these mandates, in all these positions, and in the 2 books he wrote. He has always been a visionary man, a man who has opened up the dialogue between Judaism and the Muslim religion. I don't know where he found the time to open this dialogue. In Saudi Arabia, Qatar, United Arab Emirates, Bahrain, Oman, Palestine, Singapore, Europe, South America, Kazakhstan, Morocco, and the list is much longer than that. Rabbi Marc Schneier is now talking to us about his experience lived on this dialogue. Thank you.
document. Until February 2019, no one in the Emirates spoke of their Jewish community. But because this document caused a tremendous interfaith initiative, not only in UAE but throughout the Gulf, that the Muslim Gulf leaders have now recognized that there is a Jewish community in the Gulf. And before we speak about respect and tolerance, first you need recognition. You need to acknowledge that you have a faith community. And that was a direct result of this document being signed. So thanks to His Holiness the Pope, and thanks to the Muslim leadership of Al-Azhar University, there is now an official Jewish community in the United Arab Emirates. One final message. Last night, I had the distinct honor, thanks to Rav Levi, thanks to Imam Al-Zir and the Florence School for Dialogue, to be honored along with the Secretary General of the Muslim World League, His Excellency Sheikh Alisa, in recognition of our work to bring Muslims and Jews together. While we were walking to the ceremony, so I reminded Sheikh Al-Isa that I am the 18th generation of rabbis in my family. 18 generations. First began in Russia, then in Vienna, and then in New York. 5 generations were in Vienna, until Hitler marched in March 1938, and most of my family was exterminated in Auschwitz. Dr. Alisa said to me, Adolf Hitler, he was as evil as Pharaoh in the Bible. I was very, very happy to hear that Dr. Alisa is so familiar with the story of Pharaoh and the Jewish people. So with this, I conclude, my friends, that the story of God redeeming the Jewish people from Pharaoh in Egypt, according to the Bible, God brought 10 plagues upon the Egyptians. The ninth plague was the plague of darkness. And according to our commentators, it was not a darkness that affected the eyes, but it was a darkness that affected the heart. That physically they could see each other, but they did not care for the other. They did not feel for the other. And that, my friends, is the most terrible plague of all. And this document that was signed in Abu Dhabi was signed to bring the light of understanding, the light of caring, that enables us to see the other.
a tutti noi di vedere l'altro.
Christians, Muslims, Jews,
I musulmani, gli ebrei
that can keep aglow the light to see each other.
possono continuare a vedersi,
And th-
continuare ad avere questa luce.
And this is my prayer this evening,
E questa è la mia preghiera di questa sera.
that as members of different faiths,
Come membri di diverse fedi religiose
that we should see one another.
ci si possa vedere gli uni gli altri,
Let us see one another as the children of God,
tutti come figli di Dio,
and let us see one another as people
tutti come persone,
who are to be treated
persone che
with the,
devono essere trattate
with the dignity,
con la dignità,
the justice,
con la giustizia
and the compassion
e con la compassione
that we claim for ourselves.
che esigiamo per noi stessi.
Thank you so much. Bye-bye.
L'ultimo giorno del meeting del
In the last day of the meeting in El Cairo in 2010, we used the citadel of Saladin as the location to have the concert of the Chopin Trio that Professor Joseph Weiler, a well-known Jewish, really liked. We all went happily there, and Weiler was not there. Where is he? He was walking from town up to the Mount of Mokattam, where Saladin city is. And why? There's the car. No, he cannot take the car because today it's a Saturday. He has to respect the Saturday. So my dear friend Andrea Simoncini and I were shocked, and we were almost fearing Weiler's angriness because he arrived all sweaty and shocked. And so we went to the theater and we sat far away from him. He sat there, he followed the concert, and he was happily there. But then he had to go back to the hotel and had to go down the hill and walk 2 more hours. At the beginning, we didn't recognize his tradition. We forgot about it. We forgot that Saturday is a special day, and we forgot about that. But when he decided to go downhill, we all went with him. Muslim, Catholic, Orthodox, and non-Jewish people. We walked all together to pay respect to Saturday. And I believe that this document has opened a similar way that begins with recognition. It was a kind of pilgrimage that I experienced walking down that hill. And that kind of pilgrimage is open to all of you. So you're all invited to support the meeting to continue this journey. I would like to thank very much all our speakers, His Excellency Ortega Martín, Professor Kanso, Rabbi Levi, and the dear Rabbi Schneier. Thank you all and have a nice evening.